Long ago, there were two sisters named Tam and Cam who had the same father but different mothers. The two sisters were almost the same age. Tam was the eldest daughter, while Cam was the stepdaughter. Tam's mother had passed away when she was still a child. After a few years, their father also passed away. Tam stayed with her stepmother, who was Cam's mother. However, Tam's stepmother was a cruel person. Every day, Tam had to do all sorts of chores, from tending to the buffaloes, carrying water, peeling cassava. At night, she even had to grind rice and pound it into rice flour, with no end to her tasks. Meanwhile, Cam was pampered by her mother, enjoying a life of ease and privilege. She stayed at home all day without having to do any heavy work. One day, their wicked aunt gave each of the two sisters a basket and told them to go to the pond to catch shrimp and crayfish. She promised, whoever fills their basket first will be rewarded with a red bodice. In the field, Tam, who was skilled at catching snails, quickly filled her basket with both fish and crayfish in just one afternoon. On the other hand, Cam wandered aimlessly from one field to another, and by evening, she had caught nothing. Seeing Tam with a full basket, Cam said to her sister, Sister, your hair is full of mud. Why don't you step into the fresh water and get a good wash to get rid of it? Otherwise Mother is going to scold you." Believing it to be true, Tam went down to the pond and immersed herself in the deep water to cleanse herself. Taking advantage of the situation, Cam emptied all of Tam's crayfish into her own basket and hurried back home. When Tam stepped out of the water, she found her basket empty, and she sat down, holding her face and crying inconsolably. At that moment, a deity was sitting on a lotus blossom. Suddenly, upon hearing Tam's cry, the deity descended and asked, "Why are you crying?" Tam told the deity about the situation. The deity then said, "All right, Tam, please calm down. Look inside the basket and see if there's anything left." Tam looked into the basket and then said, "There's only one small fish gobies. Take that small fish home and release it into the well to raise it. For each meal, eat 2 bowls and save one to feed the fish. Every time you feed it, remember to call it like this: Come up and eat our golden and silver rice, but do not touch the rice of others. If you don't call it right, it won't come up, remember that." After speaking, the deity vanished. Following the deity's instructions, Tam released the small fish into the well. From that day onwards, after each meal, Tam would save some rice and secretly feed it to the fish. Every time Tam called out, the fish would surface and eagerly consume the rice she threw into the well. Day by day, their bond grew stronger, and the fish grew visibly larger. Observing Tam's actions of bringing rice to the well after each meal, the wicked stepmother grew suspicious and instructed Cam to spy on her. Cam hid behind the bushes near the well and listened to Tam calling out to the fish, memorizing the exact words, before returning home to report everything to their mother. That evening, the wicked stepmother instructed Tam to wake up early the next morning to tend to the buffalo and warned her, "My child, the village has started to enforce field restrictions. Tomorrow, when you go to tend the buffalo, you must take them to graze far away, not near our fields. If you graze them near fields, they will take away our buffalo." Tam obeyed, and the next morning she took the buffalo to graze far away. Meanwhile, back at home, Cam brought a bowl of rice to the well and called out to the fish, just as Tam did. Upon hearing the call, the fish surfaced. Tam, who was prepared, caught the fish and brought it home to be cooked. In the evening, when Tam returned with the buffalo, after they had finished eating, Tam brought a bowl of rice to save for the fish in the well. Tam called out repeatedly, but the fish didn't surface as it used to. Tam kept calling and calling, but all she saw was a clump of blood floating on the water's surface. Realizing that something unfortunate had happened to the fish, Tam burst into tears. The deity appeared once again and asked, "Why are you crying?" Tam recounted the situation to the deity, and the deity advised, "The fish has been eaten. My child, you should stay silent. Then, collect its bones, find 4 jars, put the bones inside, and bury them under the 4 corners of your bed." Tam followed the deity's instructions and went to look for the fish's bones. However, she searched all the corners of the garden and the yard but couldn't find them anywhere. A chicken noticed this and said to Tam, "I can help you find the bones. Give me a handful of grains, and I will dig up the bones for you." Tam scooped up a handful of grains and threw them to the chicken. The chicken ran into the kitchen and after a while, it found the bones. Tam then collected the bones, placed them in the jars, and buried them under the 4 corners of her bed, just as instructed by the deity. After a while, the king organized a festival that lasted for several nights. People from different villages, young and old, dressed in their finest clothes and eagerly went to see the festivities. On the roads, clothes were flowing like a river, with new garments appearing one after another. Even the stepmother and stepsister Cam prepared beautiful clothes to attend the festival. When they saw Tam also wanted to go, the stepmother scolded her. Later, the stepmother mixed a handful of rice with a handful of grains and told Tam, "You must finish separating the rice from this mixture before you can go anywhere. Don't leave it unfinished, or you'll have nothing to eat when you return." With these words, the stepmother and stepsister left in their fancy clothes, while Tam sat down to separate the rice and grains. After a while, she only had a small handful. Realizing that it would take a long time to finish, feeling sad and lonely, she began to cry. At that moment, the deity appeared and asked, "What's the matter? Why are you crying?" asked the deity. Tam pointed to the basket and said, "My stepmother forced me to pick the rice separately, grain by grain, and the grain separately, before I could go and see the festival. But by the time I finished, the festival had already ended. There was nothing left to see. Don't cry anymore, my child. Place the basket in the middle of the courtyard, and I will send a flock of sparrows to help you pick up the grains. But what if the sparrows eat them and I still get punished when I return? Just tell them like this: Sparrows, come down and gather for me. Eat any grain, and I'll strike you die. That way, they won't eat anything belonging to you." Suddenly, there were sparrows landing on the courtyard to pick up the grains of rice and wheat. They had swiftly and efficiently completed the task, leaving nothing behind. However, once the sparrows had flown away, Tam burst into tears again. The fairy asked, "Why are you still crying?" "I am in tatters, and they won't let me into the festival." "Dig up the jars where you buried the bones of the little bird earlier, and you will have everything you need to attend the festival." Tam obediently went to dig up the jars. In the first jar, she found a set of brand new clothes, including a silk dress, a silk scarf, a silk jacket, and a beautiful headdress. In the second jar, she discovered a pair of intricately embroidered shoes that fit her perfectly. As she dug up the third jar, she was surprised to find a small pony. As soon as the pony touched the ground, it transformed into a real horse. Finally, she opened the last jar and found a lovely saddle.